Hey folks, Aurini here. You know, I tell you, loneliness is an awful thing. I guess it's part of this modern society of ours. There's so many of us locked into such a tight-knit area, and yet it's so hard to find people to be your fellow citizens, be your brothers or sisters, to be part of your tribe. And we evolved to live in tribes, and we need those people. So I just wanted to tell any of you out there that are lonely, don't have anybody with you, bear through it. It's going to change. Just give it a bit longer, you'll be alright. Now anyway, this is my third video on psychology. This time I want to ask the question, does psychology know anything? Now to start off with, I was reading a tragic story earlier today. It's about a writer, a philosopher who started philosophizing some things and was a full-time member of the military, and who was doing a degree and also doing some social projects on the side, and whose philosophy developed in a sort of religious mania. If any of you have read the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The poor bastard went completely mad. Now, during the first part of the story, I was very glad that there's a psychiatric establishment there to take care of him. Like, he recounts in his memoirs that he went to the psychiatric establishment and they tried to help him out, talk to him, put him in a nice little rubber room so he can't hurt himself, or try and nail himself to a cross, or whatever the hell he was going to do, because poor bastard was going properly insane. And so I was very glad those people were there to care for him. And he says the first group of them were very kind. But then, as he started to recover, things started to change. You see, the man got diagnosed with manic depression. And from his own accounts, as well as the journal that he wrote during the time, which he published, posted photos online, manic depression doesn't fit. In that story, I see an extremely sane man, confused by his belief in God, and overwhelmed by the stress in his life, developing a specific sort of religious mania. But he was mostly right. Here's the thing, if society had been sane, he never would have come up with an insane ideology. It's the fact that society was insane, so he came up with a sane ideology, and that drove him nuts. And I really see myself in that. I'll link to the story at the bottom if you want to read it all, but it's very similar to what happened with Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Ultimately, the difference between myself and him is I think I've always kept one foot on the ground. In that I think that he is some sort of deist, whereas I'm just a proper atheist. And I don't expect anything out of the universe other than consistent behavior. And the only sort of philosophy or ideology which would drive me insane would be if the universe started behaving in an insane manner. Now, why did I tell you this story? I'm glad that we have modern mental asylums for people that aren't as cruel and brutal as they were 100 years ago. I think the movie Shutter Island gives you a good impression, although not a very accurate one, about what asylums were like in the 1800s. I'm glad we have these people. I'm glad we have psychologists and psychiatrists. However, we also have major problems with psychiatric institutions. Many studies have been published upon this, about how once you go to a psychiatric asylum, you're never found sane. You're just exempted from being insane. And how our natural behaviors poison the whole process. We pretend it's a disease. We say it's just a disease. And yet doctors have no qualms talking to somebody with cancer. But psychiatrists, in practice, will avoid talking to people that are crazy, because crazy people are low status, and the doctors must be high status. At which point, the administration, wanting to be high status, mimics the doctor's behavior, and they ignore and avoid the people that are low status, i.e. the crazy people, i.e. the people that need their fucking help. There's a lot of problems with this whole thing, because there's no fine line between what is a disease and what is a choice. And so as a general principle, I'd advise you folk to probably avoid psychology if you can. If you need it, if you're at your wit's end, don't hurt yourself. Go. Those people might be imperfect, but they will help you. But I want them to be perfect, and that's why I'm criticizing them. I want them to be better than they currently are. Get help if you need it. Don't if you can avoid it. Now this brings us to the ultimate question of part 3 in psychology. Do psychologists know anything? Well, does anybody know anything? As I expressed in an earlier video, I think there's essentially 3 levels of approach to knowledge. The highest level is Bayesian rationality. That's the mathematical construct I subscribe to. I think, based upon the evidence I have, is the most accurate way to mimic reality and arrive at correct conclusions. I'm not going to talk about that. The next best is science. Science is a system of reasoning to understand reality which is idiot-proofed against our innate biases. Because we're bloody monkeys that speak. Science is designed to idiot-proof it so that even dumb fucking monkeys can use science properly. Now what if you don't have science? What if you haven't discovered science? Well, at that point, you get right down to trial and error. And so here's the big question. Can you learn anything by trial and error? Well, of course you can. I'm sure that most of you know how to drive. And you didn't apply a scientific method to driving. But you still learned, didn't you? And you know what? We were building cathedrals long before we had the scientific method or proper engineering based upon scientific principles. Engineering, before science, was nothing but trial and error. We've got crop control. We know how to grow crops in different countries. And we do it rather well, despite a complete surfeit of science. And you know what? Psychology, despite being a pseudoscience, has picked up a few interesting ideas. And that's my point this time around. So that psychology, for the most part, is based upon a non-science. And so innately it has ideas that are just as valid as priesthood or novel writers could come up with. But on top of the pseudoscience, they have applied the scientific method. Now you have to take all of these results with a grain of salt, because they're not real science, because there's no grounding in science. But they did apply the scientific method to pseudoscience. And there are some areas that psychology has made worthy discoveries. And that's what I'm going to be covering in my following videos. That's the point of this video, is that science is not the only approach to knowledge. It is a better approach. But simply saying that psychology is not a science doesn't mean we can throw out the baby with the bathwater. So next time around, I'll tell you about some psychology worth knowing. Anyway, you folks take care of yourselves. And here, Aurini out.